Well, good morning. Well done for being in the building at 10:30. Everyone else is still out having a coffee, but it is good to be in here together. As you can see, I've got my arm in a sling. I got tackled very well at soccer yesterday. It was a very fair tackle, but I ended up in the air and then landing on my shoulder. And so I've done something to the AC joint, hurt the ligament, but it'll be fine soon. Well, Sam and Maddie are going to come and lead us in a couple of songs as we begin, and I think that if we start singing, then people will come in and join us. So why don't, if you'd like to stand with me, and I will pray, and these guys will lead us in a few songs, and people will come in and join us. Father, I thank you that we can come freely here as people to learn about you and to worship you as you invite us to do. And so as we come this morning, give us that sense of freedom, give us that sense of being with family in the truest sense, of being able to relax and be ourselves and to be welcomed as accepted as we are. We know that you are a God who welcomes and accepts us as we come to you. And so here we are. We're coming and we invite you to work amongst us this morning. Amen.
Open the eyes of shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love. We sing holy, holy, holy. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. See you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love. We sing holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. See you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love. We sing holy, holy, holy. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love. We sing holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. The splendor of the King, clothed in majesty. All of earth rejoice, all of earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light. The darkness tries to hide, trembles at his voice, trembles at his voice. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? Oh, see how great is our God. From age to age he stands, and time is in his hands, beginning at the end, beginning at the end. The Godhead three in one, Father, Spirit, Son, Lion and the Lamb, Lion and the Lamb. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? Oh, see how great is our God. Name Oh, how great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. Oh, sing how great is our God.
Well, there's something in that is your greatness. That is a reason that we are here. That some of us have experienced something of that greatness, and we want to know more about that. Some of us are curious about this God that we come together to worship and learn about. And Father, my prayer is that today as we gather, just as a little family here in Gordon, that you might show us something of your greatness that we had forgotten or hadn't yet seen. We would be reminded of who you are. We'd be reminded of who we are. And we'd find ourselves free in that place. That for those who have come in this morning burdened and weighed down and in difficult places, that while the circumstance might not change as we walk out, there'd be a sense of you with us. That your greatness, who you are, will give us confidence to walk out of this place, knowing that you are good and we can do this with you. We thank you for this time and thank you for this little family. I want to pray now for Otto, who is going to come and share with us for one of these stories that you tell, Jesus. And I pray for him that as he speaks, that there'd be clarity and there'd be this ability for us to hear and to listen to what you're saying through him. We invite you to speak, Father, as we meet now. Amen. Grab a seat. That was like magic. I started with about 3 people in the room and you're all having coffee, play a few songs and everyone's here. Good to see everyone. I'm going to hand over to Otto. Thanks, Otto.
Thanks, Steve. Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? We good? Thanks for all being here this morning. It was a rainy, kind of cold autumn's, but it's now sunny and it's cleared up, so that's great. I think one of the core feelings that we feel as humans is this feeling of whether we belong, right? And I think this question is written on every single page of human history. I think from the very beginning, ever since we've lived together as a society, we ask that question, right? Who is in? Who is out? Who's a member of the club? And who is an outsider? I think we have in-groups and out-groups in all areas of our lives, right? In our workplaces, in our schools, in our families, in our friendship groups, even in church here. We have inside groups and outside groups, politically, economically, culturally, all across the domain of human life, right? And it's probably something that we feel in our daily lives as well. Don't know why I'm wearing my sunnies. A bit of a dramatic act earlier. That was a prop for that. And so sometimes we might feel like we're on the outside, like we don't belong. Do you know that feeling when you look onto other people and everyone seems like they have it together, they're confident, they're so sure of themselves. They're like an insider who's been here for a while and knows the ropes. Or maybe you have that feeling of being on the inside and you feel like, oh, I know this place. And it feels really sweet being an insider, right? So I think in all in-groups and out-groups, there's this theme of exclusion, right? It feels really, really good to be on the inside and then exclude those who are less in, who are less of a member. And I think, this is one of the ways that we do make an identity for ourselves, is this sort of act of exclusion. I think nowadays, these issues are more pressing than ever, right? We live in a postmodern, multicultural, multi-generational kind of society, especially here in Sydney. Also, especially here in our church, right? At Gordon Baptist, you see people from all generations, all kinds of cultures, people with different walks of life, with different views. And I think if you look back 2,000 years to Jesus' day, this was no less different, right? You read through the stories of Jesus and it's filled with all these in-groups and out-groups. You talk about people from other cultural backgrounds. You read about Samaritans, about women, about common laborers. You read about the poor, the disabled, right? In groups and out groups everywhere. And there are all these complex social dynamics. In this complex social soup, Jesus spent a fair while telling some stories about the kind of society or world that he wanted to bring about, right? Ooh, is this a thing? Any kids here? No, I don't think so. Kids can go up for kids' life if you have kids now. So Jesus, in the social soup, spent some time telling stories about the kind of world that he wanted to bring about, right? And the word that he used was the kingdom that he wanted to bring about. It's been about 8 weeks now. For the past 8 weeks already, we've been going through this series, Parables of the Kingdom, looking at these stories that Jesus tells and seeing what he has to say. In these stories, a common theme that bubbles up often is this idea of who's in and who's out. And so, yeah, often the things that Jesus says challenges what society believes to be true and knows to be true. So that's the sort of background and themes that we're going to jump into today. So let's jump into today's story. I was wondering if someone could, can you see that? I was wondering if someone could read this out in a nice British accent. You can do it. Send it.
The Pharisee and the tax collector. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. 2 men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted.
Thanks, Adrian. Excellent reading voice. So, today's story. It's quite a simple one, right? But you know what it actually is? It's one of those industry superfund ads. Compare the pair. Same age, same income. The first man, he's well educated, morally upstanding, well respected. He's a role model and a community leader, right? He's doing well and he's doing proud. He says, I fast twice a week, like any good Jew, and I give a good portion of my income away. I take my religion very seriously. Thank you, God, that I am not like other men. You know, people who extort others, people who are unfair or unjust, or conduct themselves in dishonorable ways. I am a man of honor, says the Pharisee. Unlike this bozo over here. And over here you get the second man. He is a tax collector. As you may or may not know, the tax collectors had a really bad rap back in the day. He was typically seen as a greedy, traitorous kind of man. He was a snitch of the Jewish people that said, I'm going to side with the Romans, and I'm going to sell my own people out so that I can make a bit of wealth for myself. You know, when you see on the news those guys who are arrested for like financial crime or fraud or whatever, like swindling money, he's one of these guys, right? That's the kind of reputation that he would have. He's not proud. He's very solemn. And he realizes the gravity of what he's done, and he can't even bear to look up. He feels a lot of shame. He says, God, what I've done is wretched. I'm a wretched man. Please have mercy on me. Compare the pair, right? Same age, same income. but two completely different approaches and attitudes to life, right? Two different ways of seeing themselves, two different ways of relating to other people. So at the end of this parable, Jesus asks, when these two men go home after this visit to the temple, who does God look favorably upon? And it's the second guy, it's the tax collector, right? Why is that? What does the first guy, the Pharisee, what does he do wrong? And what does the second guy, the tax collector, what does he do right? And in answering those questions, what does this teach us about what God values and how his kingdom operates? Any thoughts? Or I'll just put it out, it's okay if not. First guy was too proud. Yeah, thought he was doing everything right. Thank you. You. All right, God loves people with autism. Thanks, you. Any other thoughts? It was very judgmental, the Pharisee. Yeah, and there's something about that. So, let's unpack this a bit further. I want to talk about three things today. I want to talk about performance, about comparison, and about self-worth. Those are sort of three themes that we're going to take. So, let's start with the first. Let's talk about performance. I want to share a bit about myself and about some of the things that I wrestle with and struggle with that give me a lot of issues with my mental health. And there's a part of myself in particular that causes a lot of grief. And it's this part. It's the part of me that needs to perform. I am a performer. Some of you might be performers as well. Now, I don't mean I went to theatre school and do Shakespeare, and sometimes a bit dramatic, but what I mean is I was raised in a culture where performance was really important. I internalized the sense that I need to perform or else. And so I got really good at it. So I was raised in the way of the Asian family. Do you know what that means? It means when other kids were outside playing, I was inside playing the piano, right? So it's, I think that typifies the Asian upbringing experience. It's, you either learn piano or violin, right? And you do the A, M, E, B grades. Like, did anyone else do the grades? Yeah, you go up with grades. If you were really intense, you would do music competitions, Eisteddfods, things like that. I did all of those. And then there'd be this circle of Asian mums who would brag about their children to each other. It was a competition amongst them to see who could have my son's did grade 7. Oh, mine did grade 8. It was this sort of like competition. We were really, really pushed to perform. This is a photo of me back in the day when I had short hair in year 12. This was me playing a piano solo in the Sydney Opera House when I was in year 12. And I think, for me, this was a big sort of push. I was pushed to be able to do this. And that was a big part of my upbringing, right? But in the typical Asian childhood experience, it's not just music that you're pushed to perform. The big ticket item is academic performance, right? Academic performance was something that was really highly regarded and valued in my family. Education, number one, right? In my family, it was important to do well. My father was quite a clever man, and he would tutor me. So from a very young age, like 5 or 6, maybe even 4, he would get me doing these exercise booklets every day and then past exam papers almost every day, just a little bit. But that was a very regular part of my childhood growing up. When I did well and got the exercise as well, he would be like, oh, okay, he would be pleased, right? And then I would feel, phew, I can relax. I can go and play computer games or whatever now, right? But the times when I didn't perform so well, he'd be quite disappointed. Sometimes he'd even get quite angry. I remember this time I didn't do well on this practice paper, and he came into the room. He was very angry. I was on the computer. He like pulled the plug out of the socket. He was yelling. For a young kid, that was a very scary experience. And in those moments, I had learnt, geez, I really need to perform, or else, right? I couldn't let that disapproval, disappointment, anger happen. And so I got really good at performing, right? My father made me a cold-blooded killing machine at standardized exams. I mean, that was my forte. So in primary school, I sat the selective school exam, smashed it, and got into a high school. And in high school, I did all the maths competitions and whatnot, smashed it, right? Got full marks. Did the HSC, smashed it, got full marks. Got into medical school. Guess what was waiting for me? More exams. And so smashed that. Now I'm a doctor. Now I'm anxious and depressed all the time. So, all the way through my upbringing, I had internalized this idea that my performance really mattered. And I built my entire sense of self-worth around it. If I was able to perform well, I had a sense of relief. And if I didn't perform well, I was in this constant, perpetual state of feeling worthless, inadequate, not enough. So I was really scared to be that. So I worked really hard to make sure I didn't feel those uncomfortable emotions. Now, the part of me which learned that performance is really important didn't just affect academics and music. It spread into absolutely every single part of my life, right? So I learned that I needed to perform in order for people to love me, right? To approve of me, to treat me well. So I figured out that if I could figure out what people's wishes were, what people wanted, starting with my parents, but then eventually everyone, and I could fulfill that to a really high standard, then that's how I could make sure that I was loved, right? In Chinese, we have a word. It's called guai. You guys know what that means? It's a word that Chinese parents use to describe a kid who's very good, very obedient, very well-behaved, right? I was that guai kid, right? I was the good boy. But I wasn't just the good boy. I was the goodest boy, right? Because I knew I had to perform. And so I took this way of relating into all my relationships, to all my friendships, to all my colleagues. I try and be the best friend possible, the best colleague possible, right? I want to do everything. I'd be there to listen to my friends. I go out of my way to help them. I want to make a really good impression because I really want people to like me. Because if I can perform, then people will approve of me, right? The only way I knew how to feel safe in my relationships was to perform. Whenever I couldn't perform or didn't perform, I'd feel terrible. It'd be a catastrophe. I could spend days beating myself up. I get into periods where I have low moods. And that's because there's a voice inside me that I'm fighting against that says, you better be performing, otherwise you're not enough. Have you heard the term people-pleasing? Yeah, that's what this is, right? It's when you internalize that need to perform relationally in order to be safe relationally. But it wasn't just academics, wasn't just music and performing socially and relationally. This was no less true, the performance in me, than in my spiritual life as a Christian, right? I grew up going a little bit to church because my grandma brought us to church, and then I joined my high school Christian group and went on from there. How did I know that I was acceptable as a Christian? Well, it was in the exact same way that I knew how to be acceptable in every other area of life, right? To be acceptable son, friend, student. I needed to perform. So I performed religiously and morally. And I said, I can't let God down like I let my father down when I do the practice papers wrong. I need to get this right. And so I worked really hard. I did all the things. I read all the books I could. I learned everything with a voracious hunger. From year 11, I was writing Bible studies, and then I was leading Bible studies. I started a youth group and then coordinated that for several years. That was at my old church. I would attend Christian events. I would run Christian events. I would I would meet up with younger Christians and read the Bible with them and mentor them. I would invite my non-Christian friends to read the Bible. I had multiple going on at once. I threw myself into a frenzy of religious activity because I wanted to be a really good Christian, right? I'll tell you how serious I was. Ready? I went to the prayer meetings every week. right? Like, no one goes to the prayer meetings unless you actually want to be there. Like, I thought, oh, I really can't, I wanted to do that. When I was growing up, I was reading some popular Christian writers at the time, and they talked a lot about this idea of the lukewarm Christian. Have you heard that term before? Yeah, it's a term that describes this Christian who is neither hot, neither cold. They say they're a Christian, but they don't really care that much, don't show it in their actions. And I thought to myself, ooh, I don't want to be like that, right? I don't want to be someone that underperforms. I want to be someone who's real, who's genuine, who works hard. I don't want to be a lukewarm Christian. I want to be acceptable to God. And so I performed my ass off, doing all this stuff, living a busy schedule in order to maintain that sense, running. And I prayed, oh, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, especially not like those lukewarm Christians, right? I run Bible studies twice a week. I give 110% of my energy to be the best Christian possible. That's me, right? The Pharisee is me. He worked hard to do everything right. I also feel like I worked hard to do everything right. And then Jesus tells this parable, and he says, at the end of the day, who goes home justified? Who goes home with God's approval? And it's the second guy, it's the tax collector, not me, who's done everything right to a high standard. What's Jesus's point here? You'd think doing all those things and performing well and doing all those things would be a good thing, right? Well, I think he explains that in the first verse of this text. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Those who trusted in themselves that they were righteous. I really like Eugene Peterson's translation of this same verse, right? The same verse, he translates this as that. Jesus told this story to some who were complacently pleased with themselves over their moral performance and looked down their noses at the common people. I think that phrase, complacently pleased with themselves over their moral performance, that really strikes a chord in me, right? Because performance was exactly how I make sure I'm okay and acceptable. And I think this is exactly what Jesus is trying to overturn. It's a really strong current that's in me, also in our culture. And he's saying, in God's kingdom, your performance is not the most valuable thing. He doesn't need you to perform. It's strange, right? Because we would think, for the religious person, the most important thing is your moral performance. But no, he says no. What God values, rather, are the kinds of qualities that we see the tax collector display, right? Honesty, humility, self-awareness. It's very easy to take your performance and put your self-worth on it. The term that Jesus uses to describe this is self-righteousness. And I think we often don't do this consciously. Like, no one walks into a room and says, I am the best. Often we subconsciously fall into that, right? So, next step. If the first step to self-righteousness is working hard to perform well, then the second natural step that follows is then comparing your performance to other people's performance, right? When you can compare your performance and see that you're doing better than other people, ooh, that's a sweet sense of worth, right? You go, I'm tracking well. I can feel so good. Performance's younger brother is comparison. The two go hand in hand, right? So if we go back to this Pharisee guy, he says, thank you, God, I am not like other men. And he lists them up. Thank you that I'm not an extortioner, I'm not unjust, I'm not an adulterer, or even like this tax collector over here. What is he really saying here? He's saying, when I look at these other people, I can see that they're not performing to the same standard I am. And that makes me feel better than myself. He's putting other people down. We talked about exclusion earlier. And I think that's what he's doing. He's making an other of all these people. He's excluding them. He's creating a club where he's the insider, gold, platinum member, and everyone else does not belong. I think there's no quicker way to feel a sense of self-importance by judging someone that you deem to be inferior. And interestingly, I find often the things that we judge about other people are often the things that we hate about ourselves, that we judge in ourselves, right? The things that we desperately work hard not to be. Those are the things that we tend to judge other people. So when I was growing up as a Christian, I feel like I did this, right? Out of a desperate need to be someone who didn't underperform, I tried to be someone who wasn't inadequate, I would compare myself to all these less faithful or less serious Christians, right? Those lukewarm guys. I'd go to prayer meeting and I'd be like, oh, I wish those other guys would come. I wish people would just care as much as I did. Why don't they care as much? I guess I'm just more faithful. Or obviously I didn't articulate those words in that way, but that feeling was there, where you sort of compare other people. And I think, why don't people get involved? Why don't people do things? Are they lazy? Are they just not as interested? Like, I felt a sense of, oh, I am a little bit superior because of that. Obviously, this way of faith wasn't a very sustainable one. I carried this on for several years, and then I burnt out dramatically. You can't really live that way. And thankfully, since then, I've grown and gone out of that way of thinking. But then what I discovered was that now I had a newfound set of things to rebel against. So now I hated who I was previously, and now I look at those people, right? Those religious, pious, maybe conservative people, and I go, geez, wow, thank God that I'm not like one of those Christians, right? And thankfully I'm not, so snobbish and self-righteous and judgmental. Like, why can't everyone be as open-minded as I am, right? And I find myself now judging them. And you see how hard it is to get out of this comparison game, right? It's easy to live in a bubble where you surround yourself with people who are similar to you, and what you do is you look at the people who are not like you, and you create these straw men. Have you heard these terms? Straw men, caricatures of people that you don't want to be. People who are in fact actually just humans, imperfect humans, right? And rather than treat them with kindness, compassion, curiosity, listening to what they have to say, and then disagreeing respectfully and critically considering what they're saying. Now, it's a lot easier to just slam them, right? Demonize them. And this is a game that I think Jesus is saying that he doesn't want us to play. You look at the tax collector. He didn't look at anyone else. He just looked at himself. It was just him and God, and he did the very, very difficult thing of sitting with his own uncomfortable emotions about how he felt about himself. He doesn't pretend to himself, he doesn't pretend to God, right? There's a certain honesty and courage that it takes to do that. That's something that the Pharisee, even though he was morally outstanding, very clever man, very accomplished religiously, that was something that he didn't have the courage to do, right? He performed well, he compared his performance to others, that made him feel really, really good about himself. But can you also see that that is almost a cheap kind of feel-good moment? It's a fragile way to live. Because let me ask you this question. Do you think the Pharisee is a secure man? In my opinion, self-righteousness, even though it always seems to be strong and confident on the outside, almost always betrays an underlying sense of inadequacy or insecurity about your own worth, right? And I think this is what the Pharisees' behavior is all about. It's what my behavior was all about growing up. It's why we perform, it's why we compare ourselves. So let's talk about that to finish off, right? Let's talk about self-worth, let's talk about insecurity. I've got a question for you. How do you think the Pharisee would perform? How do you think he would feel if suddenly he wasn't able to perform? Or if his performance started slipping? Let's say for whatever circumstances, get an accident, he had health issues. If he wasn't able to do all his stuff, how do you think he would start to feel? Or if I word that question another way, more personally, how do you feel when you feel like your performance is starting to slip? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Yeah, about average. Feel like a nobody, did you say? Yeah. Embarrassed. I think that's a good word. Lots of shame. Disappointment. At what? Yeah, at yourself. So you can imagine how this Pharisee would feel, right? The moment he stops performing, you can feel those feelings creep in, the inadequacy, something's wrong, something's a little bit uncomfortable, a bit of anxiety, probably an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. Am I still acceptable to God? A quiet little voice says. He might fight this feeling. He might protest and say, no. Look at all the things I've done. Look at it. Like I fast twice a week. I give 10% of all I own to the poor. That's good enough, right? Right? And there's probably a little voice inside that says, nah, mate, not good enough. You gotta do more. He said, oh, I'm not good enough. I better do something about that. And to cope with his feelings, he might redouble his effort, fast even harder, give even more, throw himself into even more religious activity. Do you know that sense of working harder, distracting yourself from those feelings to gain back that sense of control? He's working hard and harder, running harder and harder and harder, all for that very, very sweet but fragile feeling of relief that you get from your hard work. Right? If you take away the sense of performance and comparison from this Pharisee, you can probably see how he really feels about himself underneath, right? He's scared. There's probably a sense of inadequacy, and that's why he needs to perform and compare. If you think of comparison and performance as these two siblings, big, strong siblings, appearing to be strong and self-righteous and confident, you can think maybe they're actually trying to protect the third younger sibling, which is that baby sense of self-worth, right? I think we've painted the Pharisee as kind of the bad guy in the story, but at the end of the day, he's just another human, right? He's imperfect, just like the Pharisee, just like the tax collector, just like every one of us, just like any other person, right? With basic needs for feeling valued, feeling a sense of worth, feeling a sense of acceptance. Somewhere along the way, the Pharisee took on a way of life, right? The way of performing and comparing in order to feel better about himself. And I think this probably helped him to feel better about himself and feel valued and worth in the short term. But this is probably stopping him from really developing a sustainable, healthy, stable, long-term sense of worth. You look at the tax collector, he's humble, he's self-aware, he's not feeling good, but he can be in the place to say, here's how I am, honestly, and he can ask for help. And I think this is soil that God can work to actually develop that healthier sense underneath. God looks at him and loves him. He doesn't need to perform. So, that's a picture of the Pharisee and Mask, right? We live in a culture where performance really matters. You perform at work, at school, in your families, in your friendship groups, even at church. But for Jesus, right, performance and moral performance is not the most important thing. It doesn't count for much. In our common imagination, we imagine, right? The righteous Christian, the guy who does everything, but it's not. And Jesus says God values humility, self-awareness, honesty. And this drive to perform and overperform and compare can be a huge hindrance to us actually following Jesus, being shaped by him, learning to grow in mature ways. And that's the upside-down kingdom that Jesus wants to bring about, right? God's kingdom is a safe place for imperfect people. It's a safe place to be imperfect, to make mistakes, to be human. If it was an environment where your performance mattered, where you had to meet KPIs, where you had to sort of meet certain standards and uphold certain higher standards, it would be a deeply unsafe place to actually face the real issues which are there, right? In all of us, in our societies. And it'd be a difficult place to find true healing and growth. Jesus says to anyone who's willing to welcome it, I see you and value you, and I know you're not perfect. I want to acknowledge the parts of you which are ugly, which are chaotic, which are toxic, unhealthy, and I'm willing to put up with that and bear the pain of that because I want to see you cleansed and healed. I want to see you grow. But if you want to do that, you need to bring yourself to me, honestly. So Jesus ends the parable with this. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Eugene's translation of this. If you walk around with your nose in the air, you're going to end up on your face. But if you're content to simply be yourself, you'll become more than yourself. if you need to flex your moral muscles, if you need to perform and uphold a sense of superiority or holiness, having it all together, you will only ever be as big as that fragile shell that you create for yourself. But if you're willing to be humble and honest and come as you are, you're positioned to grow and heal and flourish to be much more than you currently are. So we've talked about a lot of various things today, right? Performance, comparison, self-worth. I'm just going to throw a bunch of questions out there. With performance, I wonder what your relationship to performance is. How would you feel if you suddenly stopped performing? And how, do you rely on performance for a sense of value? In terms of comparison, who do you tend to judge and find yourself comparing yourself with? And without judging yourself too hard, curiously, why do you think you react that way to those kinds of people? And then this last bit, self-worth. What kinds of things do you do to uphold your sense of self-worth and value? How do you feel about being vulnerable with who you really are on the inside? And who are the people that you feel safe being vulnerable to? Is there anyone that you feel safe being vulnerable to? Or is that something that you want? Anyway, I'm going to leave you with all those questions, and I'm going to get out of here. So, how about I pray first? Father, disarm our need to perform, our need to compare, and let us know that we are valued as we are. Teach us to be humble, to be self-aware, and to be honest. Amen.
Could we just stay in that place of prayer for a moment longer? And what I just want to ask you is to see if you can identify what you're feeling at the moment. Just inside yourself, is there a feeling that's sitting there? It might be a sense of being settled, but there might be some discomfort, or see if you can give that a name, that feeling. If you can't name something, that's all right. You just sit there. But if you can, I want to just invite you to bring that to God now. Just bring that feeling to God. And just say to Him in yourself, this is how I am feeling. What is that about? You might ask Him a question. What do you want to say to me about this feeling? The thing is, as we are honest about how we feel and who we are and where we are, we know that we can come to God and He can help us with that. And so, Father, my prayer is that we can become people who can be ourselves before you, can be ourselves before ourselves. We're willing to be honest, to say what's happening, to say how we feel. Not to worry about what the other people think of us. And to let you shape us. I'm going to sing a song now, invite Sam and Maddie up, and invite you in this space to, if you'd like to, it's a song about coming back to God. It's about being free to come to Him. So you be free here. You might want to sit and listen or stand and sing. But I invite you to use this space to be yourself before our God.
I see it now, I'm laying it down, and I know that I need you. Run to the Father, fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Whoa, whoa. You saw my condition, your plan from the start. Your Son for redemption, the price for mine. I don't have the context for that kind of love. I don't understand, I can't comprehend. All I know is I need you. Run to the Father, fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, and again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, my heart has been in your sights long before my first breath, running into your arms is running through life from death. I feel this rush deep in my chest. Mercy is calling out. Just as I am, you pull me in. And I know I need you now. Run to the Father, fall into grace. Done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again. I run to the Father, fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart found a surgeon, my soul found a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again.
I think it's a really interesting thing that it becomes so easy. You can be a Christian for a long time and still have this impulse to want to hide things within you from God, that you feel like you have to hold things back. And I think the reminder this morning is that you don't need to hide anything from God. And so if you're kind of grown up knowing about Jesus and you kind of give your life to him, but there's still things that you're hiding, that's what he's set you free from. He's freed you from hiding things from him. And so don't be ashamed of what happens inside you, because it happens inside of every person. There are things, we're human. This is the reality. He knows that. And so if you're a hider with God, what if you started to practice being really honest with him? And see what happens. See what happens when you're really honest with what's going on inside with him. Having really honest conversation about how you feel and what's happening and what's going on. If you want to talk to someone about that, I love to talk about that stuff. But you don't need to talk to me. It's about talking to God. But if you're like, I don't know how to do that, then come and chat with me. I'd love to pray with you. This is what being church is about. It's not about being perfect, getting things right. It's about being people who walk through life together, learning what Jesus is teaching us, helping us to see things around the opposite ways. And a beautiful parable that he tells, this story that inverts our idea of what he actually wants. He wants us to be free, not to be bound. Thank you, Otto, for leading us through that story. Why don't you have a seat, and a few things I wanted to share with you before we wrap up our time together today. One is our giving as a community. It is part of our worship. Some people look at the Pharisee there and goes, "Oh, he said give 10% of their income, and we don't want to be like Pharisees, so we don't want to do that." No, it's part of our worship, but you should be free in that. You shouldn't feel compelled to have to do that to please God or anybody else. That's what God has given you responsibility for, to work out what to do with, how you will use your money. A couple of other things. We have a Sunday coming up at the end of this parable series where we're going to give some time to have a bit of a Q&A and answer some questions. There's been lots of stories that Jesus has told, and some of them are really confusing. And we've done our best at explaining how we see some of it. But you might have questions along the way. Why don't you send a text through, or come and just chat to me, or send me an email. Might be better for me to remember your question. I'm not very good at remembering the questions on the spot. So we can have a time there coming up towards the end of May. We'll be having that Sunday. 2 Sundays' time is Mother's Day. And so next Sunday and on Mother's Day, we're going to have a gift stall that's going to be out in the foyer during the morning tea. This will be gifts from Benong Gifts, which is what one of our overseas partners runs this gift organisation. And so selling these goods, and they will be available in the foyer to purchase. So come next week, ready to buy Mum a present. And if you forget next week and you get to Mother's Day and you're like, I still haven't bought Mum anything, then it's going to be open then too. So it's not too late. We have also an Alpha course that's coming up. This is a course that introduces the ideas of the Christian faith and opens up a space for people to ask questions. Has anyone here got someone that they're thinking that they might want to bring along? Or I want to encourage you to think, is there someone that I know that has questions and that I could bring along to this night? It's a safe place. Can we have a meal together? We have a short video. We have a little time for conversation. It gives someone a taste of what the rest of the course is, and we try to make it as easy a space as possible for someone to walk into. It's at Claire and my home, just down in Pymble. They're not having to walk into a church building, which can be difficult for someone who's not used to, has questions about church. But I want to encourage you to be thinking, who might you bring along to this night? I'd encourage you to bring someone, so you're not just going, okay, go to that person's house. Bring them along. It's a really casual time. Come and talk to me if you're thinking about it. It'd be helpful to know numbers of people that are going to come along as well, so you can send me an email or come and talk to me or Claire about it. That would be wonderful. Yeah. There is one other thing actually I wanted to say before we finish up this morning, and it's some exciting news. Ro and Maddie are sitting right there, and they got engaged last week. So very exciting news for Ro and Maddie. Go and say congratulations. You can see the ring. Very good news. I can see Rhonda sitting back there as well. I don't know if it'll embarrass you, Rhonda, but Rhonda had a big birthday last week too. A very, very beautiful celebration. So. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rhonda. Happy birthday to you. Hooray! Hooray! Beautiful. Well, go out of here knowing that you walk out free. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next week.
What time's the game? 8:10. See if I can. Oh, if you want, that's not very much. Hey, you're there to watch. Are you going to be watching? Yeah. Because we have done one call. What's that? We need one call. Oh, okay. It's cold outside. How are you doing? It's a sacred topic. Yeah. How bad was it? I usually like the case.